Hello loves, and welcome back to another episode on the channel. So there's a pretty common expression talked about when it talks about writing, and I've seen it start to affect how writers I know write. So I just kind of wanted to talk about that for a second today. The quote is, "Write what you know." I've seen people just write what they know because they think that's all that they can write. I think that writing what you know can be very powerful because only you know what that situation has been like or what that, felt like to you. And it helps people with empathy for you if it's just to get your emotion out and you're not planning on doing anything with this draft, or if you are planning on writing and sharing it with other people, it helps further empathy, and it helps people see into this little corner of your life that only you have, the experiences only you have been through. And it really just, I think it's very empowering that, writing is something that you can do to show other people what it is like to be in your shoes. And I think that that is very inspiring and it can be done very well. However, that is not the only reason there is to write. I think there are so many different reasons to write. I know I don't write what I know. I write situations that I haven't been in, and I'm planning on writing on situations I have been in. The reasons you write really drive what you're writing. For example, if you write what you know to show others how you're feeling, that's important. But if you write what you know to help others that feel the same way you feel, that's completely different, and that affects your writing and your style and everything else. And I think it's very important to know why you write and how that affects, because if you're just writing for yourself, you're writing very specifically about your experience. It could even be nonfiction. It doesn't even have to be fiction. But if you're writing for others to know how to take away from that and how to heal from whatever you went through and they went through and the common experience you're writing about, or to show others that this is a real condition, or to show people that this is how you have to get through this experience, or this is how I got through this experience, that's going to be a little differently than what you may have thought. I think that for people who execute writing what I know well, you have multiple different characters showing different streams of thinking and different streams of coming at this idea or this disease, this whatever you're writing about, and showing truly how that manifests from how you know it to affect you, but also how it affects others in your life. And that's more so what we see in fiction writing, but I think that's still important to take away, because while you may have experienced whatever you're writing about, somebody else might not even think it's a real experience. So you got to kind of show everybody each side of the issue, which might be their side or it might be the opposite. And I think that's how you really meet people wherever they are and help them educate about the subject and help them know what it feels like. And I think this is one of the most empowered fields of writing. My favorite type of books are books that when I get to the end of it and I'm at the author's note, it's like I wrote this for younger me, or for girls who have also been through what I've been through. Kathleen Glasgow said in the end of Girl in Pieces, wrote this for the girl on the bus who I wanted to say, I see your scars, I went through the same thing, but I didn't. And I think that that is so important as well, along with my favorite author, L'Oreal Sanderson, who, you know, went through something unimaginable and wrote about it. I'm not going to say exactly the issue she went through because it is supposed to be a mystery going into her novel about it. So just to try to avoid anybody, you know, getting some spoilers, but I think that that's just so important. And you might be saying to me, Daniela, I don't know anything. But that's an experience too. And I think that might be one of the most relatable experiences, because I feel like, especially if you are around my age watching this video, like, okay, I'm 16. If you are a teenager watching this video, you don't really know as much as you think you do. I'm sorry, you don't. Like, I don't think you can ever know everything there is to know about life and about what you're gonna go through and about what you've gone through and everything. Because I know, at least for me as a 16-year-old, everything I'm starting to look at a different way every single day. And I'm realizing new things about my experience and what I've been through and who I am every single day. So I don't think that you're just done with that at a certain point. And I think that's the beauty of, like, why we live and why we keep going and stuff like that. But I think that that's an experience too. Recently I shared a poem that I wrote in, like, one of my clubs at school that's, like, about literature and stuff like that. That was about growing up and feeling like you're not hitting those expectations little you had watching, like, High School Musical or stuff like that. Or for me, To All the Boys I Loved Before. But I think that that's relatable too. And when I shared that, a lot of people were saying, yeah, I understand that. So even if you feel like you know nothing, that is also experience. Like, that can also help people feel better about themselves. That can also help people find themselves. That it can also help people heal. Like, even just the mundane day-to-day experiences that you don't think are particularly interesting might be severely interesting for people who either don't get to have that experience. For example, like family bickering or something like that, to someone who doesn't have a relationship with their family or has divorced parents. They might be reading your story about two parents in the same household and be like, oh, I wish I had that. Or someone who is going through what you're going through and they're like, yeah, it sucks when I hear my parents fight all the time. You know what I mean? I think books are the best way to help others heal, because they find someone no matter where you are. And I think that is so empowering. And a book might find you, or something you write might find someone else, and they might be reading this and they're like, I didn't even know that this was a problem I had. So I think because of that, literature is just so inspiring in that way. And I love that it can do that. And I think that that's very important as writers, to remember that even if we don't think what we're writing about is important, or don't think that we have anything to write about, because, you know, we haven't been through traumatic experiences or anything like that, there's always something that you've been through that you can write about, that you know, that you've learned, or something that doesn't. Like, you can take a bigger theme that you haven't been through and illustrate a smaller theme. Like, I have large topics that are talked about and very hard on the people they exhibit in my work in progress, that show why found family is so important, which is something I do have, because even though I'm close with my immediate family, my, like, grandparents and stuff, none of them live where I live, so I'm not really close with them. And as an only child, I kind of had to pick my siblings, and I found my family kind of that way. So even as someone who, like, has a family, has a great home, has a great family, has a great relationship with her family, I do feel like I don't get that traditional experience of like going home with your grandparents and like your cousins and all that type of stuff. So I feel very connected to found family, and that's something I think everybody can connect to. Just finding your people, finding who you connect with, and finding like where you fit in. So just as a little example of that. But yeah, just don't be afraid to write, and as soon as you start writing, things come out. I can promise you that it will connect to somebody. There's always someone who will look at your work and be like, I needed to hear that today. And that's just what you need to remember. Especially as a young writer, I feel like we don't get the same amount of, not the same amount of respect, but we don't get like a ton of recognition because people don't think we know what we're doing, or frankly, I've had times I don't think I know what I'm doing. And I know that that's the same with other writers I know, but just know you're human. It doesn't matter your age. You can still do anything you put your mind to. You can still start your career. I'm trying to do that. Like, I know people who have, and I think it's very important to remember that your age doesn't make your experience irrelevant, because you could have been through the same amount of things as somebody who's 40 and you might be 15. You know what I mean? It doesn't matter your age. And I think that that's important to keep in mind while writing. I also think something important is, just because somebody goes through something so much worse than you doesn't mean that what you're going through or your experience is invalid. And that's like kind of something one of my friends said to me once. It's like, my experience doesn't invalidate yours because what I went through was more traumatic or more talked about or more looked down upon, and it's still experience. It still impacts you the same way it impacts me. And I think that that's also very important to look at, especially in this world of where a lot of the stuff and a lot of these topics we talk about a lot, it can be kind of discouraging when you hear somebody's testimony about what they've been through and you're like, oh, I thought I went through the same thing, but theirs was so much worse than mine. No, if you go through that, like, it impacts you the way it would impact them. It's not it's not a greater than. It's like if it's the same impact in your life as it is in theirs, it's not a greater than, less than. It's just something that happened to both of you. And if anything, the other person can probably be able to bond with you because of it. So don't be afraid to use your experience, even if you think it's like inconsequential to others. Another way, or another reason we can write, is writing to heal. This goes back to writing what you know. Even if it's just like a diary, sometimes I go through my journal and I like pick up like things that I wrote just to get stuff out of my head, and I'm like, oh, that could be very interesting for this, or a poem, or, you know, a short story idea. I really try to draw inspiration from any point in my life, if that makes sense. But I also think that writing to heal, you just pick up your computer and start writing about what you go through, even if you don't exactly know how to like word it, if you don't know what's going on with you, like, just get it out. And it translates a lot better on paper. It translates a lot better on paper than it does in your head. And that is something that I think is very important to remember too. Like, sometimes in your head it can just be so overwhelming, and with comparison, other things like that, it can just be a lot to keep it all in here. So sometimes it's just so much better to open up a Word document, get some stuff out, and then maybe even a couple days later, a couple years later, you can go back and look at it and try to make it into something. Also, I think when you're in the midst of the healing process, those emotions are really raw, and that thought process is very unfiltered. It's not like you're trying to harness back where you once were. You are in the midst of it, which is why I think some of the most powerful stuff is written in the middle of the journey and not at the end, because for this character, or for these people, they don't know what the end looks like yet. You know what I mean? They're with this character in the rising action. They haven't hit the climax yet. They don't know what's gonna happen. And if you don't know what's gonna happen either, I think that can really correlate with where the reader needs to be, where the character is gonna be, and where you are as well. And that just gives you even more bond with this character. And it gives this character a human-like depth, because part of the writer is always in the character, and part of the character is always in the writer. That's just how it's gonna be. Like, I know with my characters, each one kind of like takes on a different trait that I have, or a different trait that a person in my life that I love has. And I think that's just really interesting, because it's a part of you. And obviously you take a little bit of context from yourself to create them, which is why I think Write What You Know came from. It's because obviously your attention and your opinion and your craft of these characters in the story is going to be a little bit biased by what you've experienced yourself and how you've seen life, how you see people, how people see you. But that's what makes it so individual. That's why AI can't write books. This is why nobody else can write the way you can write, because they don't see through your lens. And that's something that's very powerful. And when you harness it correctly, it's unreplaceable. It's irreplaceable POV. So that's why kind of writing the heal is not just important as a human getting through whatever you're getting through, or trying to process your thoughts and maybe even get better, become a better human, but it also helps the reader and the character kind of relate a little bit more. And I think that it produces the most pure, raw, and best form of writing you can produce. We talked about this a little bit already, but it's also writing to reach, which is writing to help educate a group of people, or people as a whole, about the experience that you've been through, or about a topic, which I think is very interesting, and again, a different kind of take, because when you're writing to inform a reader who might not know anything about the topic, or might even be opposed to the topic, it's a bit of a different endeavor. Instead of writing and getting the reader immediately on your side and assuming that they know the context of the situation, which is very lifelike, I think, because when you're talking to somebody, or even when somebody picks up your piece of writing, not everybody knows what you're writing about. For example, Girl in Pieces again, not everybody knows that people, go to self-harm as a way of coping. And Kathleen could have helped people understand that, and therefore helps people understand victims of that. And I think that that's very important, especially in the world we live in, because not everybody is very nice to each other, and not everybody understands each other, or tries to anymore. I think it's kind of difficult to remember that, every person has a side story going on with them that you might not know, and it's very difficult because you might also have something going on that other people don't realize. And I think that's where writing really mends that, because we all know that every single character has something going on that the other characters don't know about. That's kind of a big part of writing, or about reading. Like, especially with dual POV books, it's like, oh, this person thinks this is happening, but that's really not what's happening. And I think just because that books support empathy, books promote being a better person and seeing people in a different way. Books, at their very nature, have a encoded message in whatever you're reading. even if you think it's just for entertainment, it has a theme, which I know you guys have heard from ELA. It's the actual reason why people write the book you're reading. Even if you think it's a fluffy romance, there is a reason behind. Deep, maybe. It might be deep. You might have to dig for this reason. But there is always a reason why the writer is writing this book, usually on an ethical level. That fluffy romance books aren't exactly where you think a theme would happen or be, but there's a theme in every book you're picking up. So as writers, we need to know, okay, why is this theme and this work in progress, and why is this theme important to us? What is our theme? If you might not know, I did not have a theme going into my work in progress, but it kind of developed. Why are we writing this theme? Why is this theme important to us, and how are we going to be able to execute this theme well and thought out and beautifully and in a way that touches readers beyond just being like, wow, this was a great book, and putting it down. But we want readers to be like, wow, this is a great book, and think about it as much as they possibly can. Think about it even, I know my goal is to have it like change somebody because of the context of my book and what it promotes. The biggest compliment an author can have is that their book maybe not fundamentally, but change somebody and their way of thinking. Like, that's why we write. So we need to think, okay, why are we writing this theme in this project? Why are we writing this theme? Why do we care about this theme? And how are we going to take all these things I just said and apply it to the reader so they can care about this theme as well, and this book can change them? Because that's why people read books. Even if they don't know it, that's the interesting part. If there wasn't anything to learn, these characters wouldn't be going on this journey anyway. If there wasn't anything to learn, you wouldn't be reading this book. Because that's why the characters are doing this. That's why you're, reading it. And I think as writers, that is a big part. So I want you guys to ask yourself, the next time you're writing, look at your work in progress. Go look at anything you've created. This goes for anyone, not just writers, but literally anybody. If you are contributing something to the world creatively or not creatively, look at what you want it to change, what it's promoting, and how you want the receiver to receive it. And just think about that, and if you need to go about it a different way. Because I think once you know why you're trying to get this theme across, or why you're trying to talk about this subject in this way, you're gonna go about it a different way. Because if you are trying to convince people that, saving the planet is important, for example, you might need to have a character in it who doesn't think climate change is a real thing. Or you might have to have multiple characters who all think different opinions of it. So then if one person is reading it who has one opinion and one person is reading it who has another opinion, everybody can look at it and see the same point you're making. So just try to think about that. That's all I have for today. Thank you guys so much for listening. I haven't really done a video like this before, because I've usually done like how to outline your novel, how to do this, how to do that. But this is more like a how do you write, and why is that important to you? I'm sorry, there is a vacuum going on in the background. So if you can hear that, I am so sorry. But I hope you guys enjoy this type of video. If you like more of like an ethical writing video, definitely let me know and we can do more of that. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you had a wonderful